All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio. I'm your host Ryan, and of course we cover the topics of philosophy here, mainly focusing on self-expression and personal development. So today we are returning again on the elements, but let's just talk a little bit of philosophy maybe first, just to kind of warm us up. And when we're talking about the elements, we're really talking about the important fundamental aspects of nature, the building blocks of life here, right? And I know, maybe last week we got into a bit too much show references or, whatever in terms of explaining the elements, explaining how they work, explain how they interact with each other. I tried to depict it using show references to kind of draw a correlation between what I was talking about, in the sense that this is a concept in which we can see something materialize in a show that is typically something that is not tangible, in the sense where you can't reach out and really, physically touch the wind. You can feel the wind, but you can't really manipulate it or can't do anything with it, right? Like some elements, maybe a little more than others. You could touch rocks, feel water. You can even feel the energy around fire. I'm not encouraging anybody to reach out and try to touch fire, because, what they say, don't play with fire. But in a sense, though, they are all fundamental aspects of nature, in the sense where they do all serve a purpose and they all do work in harmony, and they're meant to work in harmony. So with that in mind, we are kind of talking about ascending to a higher state of man, in a sense where we're just talking actually about Alfred North Whitehead in the book The Ascent of Man. But this is the ascent of man in the sense where this is man ascending to a higher state than he is already in his physical material world, right? So you can almost think of it as, if you observe a rock, for instance, that's something very material. You can pick it up, it's tangible, right? One of the elements you're able to interact with a lot more on a personal level, right? Where you can see the effect of it. You can move it around in your hands, you can feel the texture of it, whatever, you can observe the substance, right? Lightning is something that is a bit more obscure, in the sense where it comes and goes. You can't really control it. You can, make it manifest itself in a lab or in a science experiment or under specific circumstances, but, you can't manipulate or move it around the same way you would something like a stone or like water, because it's a little more obscure. Part of the thing about lightning is that in nature it only really occurs when it wants to occur. It occurs when there is a buildup of energy that needs to be discharged in a certain way, right? So going back to understanding how these all really come back in tandem with each other, come back into this harmonic state or harmony with each other, almost like a symphony would be, you start to think about this concept, the ascent of man, in the sense where you are ascending to a higher energy level or higher state of structure than you are currently. We said essentially you can think of rock associated with the root center, associated with the base level of this reality. I'm not going to bang my hand on the table because I was told that disrupts the mic and makes a funny sound, but essentially, if I were to bang my hand on this table and make a sound, that is, again, physical contact, making physical contact with the table and then producing a sound through that. If we're talking about some other form, it's still energy, but it's not in the sense where I can physically do something with a state which is in somewhat of a solid state, right? Like, of course, there's water in my body and, other minerals and whatever, but essentially you are using, or channeling would be the word, your form into a solid state to then create a vibration, right? So that's essentially the concept, or the overarching concept, which is occurring here. If we think about this in the sense of, going back to the higher elements, right? we're talking about refining one's energy or the energy in the system, not even just in the own body, because yeah, these processes occur in the body. We have lightning within us, actually. Again, we can't touch it, but our cells can interact with it. They send electrical impulses, through the nervous system, and which triggers the movement of all these things, right? Triggers the movement of the whole body, right? And interesting to note that you are 75% water, which essentially acts like a battery that stores energy. We're told that water can absorb energy and absorb vibration. So there's lots of science showing that water can actually act as a battery in various circumstances. So there's that. And fire, the mediator kind of in between wind and water, is the essence of basically what humankind has relied on since the beginning of time. From the sun up in the sky being a ball of plasma or a state of plasma, to the fire that man used in the cave to cook his food since the dawn of time, which they jumped around the fire and made grunting sounds and were acting like it was something to get excited over, because it's something that is a fundamental aspect of nature that can do what would Mike Tyson talk about? It can keep you warm, cook your food, but it can also burn down the house, right? So being aware that there's, in excess, anything can become a detriment, but in the proportion that you need it in, or also in too limited, it can also become a detriment, or not sufficient enough to, evoke the response that you're looking for. But in its form, which is proportional to what you need, then you essentially have a mechanism or a modality of utilizing something. Just as you would utilize a cell phone to send a long distance text message, you can use fire to cook your food, keep you warm, sharpen your concentration, just still the mind, become one with nature. Just, if any of you guys have ever gone camping out in the wilderness, then you know what it's like to just sit around the campfire and talk whatever, right? It's not about the act of, okay, yeah, you're just hanging out with your buddies, but there's a surreal aspect of nature that is going on. On the drive here this morning, I was looking up at the sun, and I was thinking, holy man, like this is like picturesque. Like just looking up at the sun behind the clouds and seeing the light break through, and just seeing that there's this great ball of energy basically in the sky that gives us all life and that provides life to every single thing on this planet, and is essentially the greatest source of not just energy, but electromagnetic energy and gravitational force in the solar system. So I think that just goes to, or speaks to rather, the magnitude at which these things actually affect us, Going back to this kind of divine form we're talking about now, we can even think about a lot of times when we think about the flow of life or the flow of time, a lot of people think time is, one directional, for instance. And, you might say, what does this have to do with the elements, Ryan? What does time have to do with any of this? Well, it has everything to do with it. I'm going to explain. So if you think about time, science is now showing that maybe time does not actually move in just one direction, but it's almost it moves in higher dimensions, in which it's almost, you could think of a sphere, almost where time is the linear diameter around the outside, and as you move inward, time operates differently. So almost if you have a way to bend yourself, then you have a way to bend time, right? But if you think of yourself as a one-dimensional being in the sense where, well, everything I see around me is physical and I don't have the ability to affect anything because there's no such thing as energy in a spiritual science or a sense otherwise, then you essentially lose the ability to affect all things magically. So understanding that is a important principle when we actually think of what these elements encompass. And when we're talking about this almost divine state, that, there is this flow of time and it might operate in all these different ways, and, it can be, bent or curved or I wouldn't say manipulated, but I would say put into a state of flux or malleability in which it can be changed to a degree, and the future can be rewritten. I would say that almost a way to think about it is you're either, a lot of spiritualists say this, and I don't necessarily always agree with it, but in the sense of being in alignment with the flow of the cosmos, it's almost that there is no other leaf, there is only divine justice. And if you're familiar with, anime, yeah, I'm assuming you know where that comes from. But essentially, there is a natural rhythmic pattern to the energy that occurs in the universe or in the cosmos, because the cosmos kind of supersedes just our universe. And I would say that this energy that moves beyond all things, that, encompasses all these different forms that we've talked about here, all the elements, metal, wood, fire and lightning are essentially come from the same one, plasma, wind, water, rock, or earth. Earth is probably more descriptional term of that, actually, or more relevant term to describing what we're talking about, because rock is just one state of earth. But the point is that there is an energy that moves between all these things, and that is a pure form of energy itself, is divine essence. It is divine energy, divine key, if you want to say, almost like you've ever seen what is it? Dragon Ball Super, almost like when they go up to Super Saiyan God or Super Saiyan Blue, there's a divine energy that encompasses that, because you're moving in a different way that your body is not used to, or that your body has not adapted to. So understanding that there's energy or type of energy beyond what humans typically interact with, and when you change your consciousness and your awareness to encompassing those aspects of reality, everything you start to, conceptualize becomes rewritten, in the sense where what you thought to be absolute no longer becomes absolute, because even that thinking and that state of awareness itself will fade out. And the reason for that essentially is because there is a higher state of consciousness that you can ascend to. And when we're talking about these elements that supersede the physical realm and its constrictions independently from this harmonic flow as a whole, we're talking about the ability to transcend these states. To put it in simple terms, we're essentially talking about transmutation, taking one thing and changing it into something else. It's almost like how would you say, if you want to think of a divine object, you can almost think about, what they talk about with the spear of destiny, where it pierced the side of Christ and it got his blood on it, and the object became divine, or it was said to have divine power after. It's not the object itself, but it's what happens to the object that makes it divine. And that could be anything. That could be purifying it in some ritual with water or whatever, or blessing it under a full moon or whatever it is, right? It's the intention behind the energy that encompasses that object. In Manly P. Hall's works, he talks about the concept that there is a magnetic field that surrounds every single thing in the cosmos, regardless of whether it's living or not. This table, for example, that I have my hands on right now, it has a magnetic field around it. Every person I see around me has a magnetic field around them. We know that from science. Science can prove that. And, science can essentially prove all of this, that it has a magnetic field or electric field around these things. But we can see it in the sense where it's actually alive in the sense of the human being. The brain emits an electromagnetic field. The heart essentially is emitting one that is actually beyond 1,000 times more powerful than that of the brain. And a short way to summarize that is you could think of the brain almost as the compass that points to whatever it's focusing on, and you can think of the heart essentially as this fundamental magnetic instrument, which is either magnetized or repelled or polarized to whatever it is entangled with in your heart. So, and that's, again, going back to being dependent on the form that your heart takes on within yourself, or the shape that the heart takes on. So, what does this mean when we're talking about these elements? Maybe we'll pull up the picture of the elements now. I don't know. Can we get that? Can we get the picture of the elements up? And we'll just cover them briefly again. We kind of covered them a bit last week. So, picture of the elements. Yeah, thanks. So here again we see the elements, and we're kind of shifting the perspective to focus on the elements that didn't really get covered last week. But essentially the point I'm trying to make around this bit of philosophy before we dive back into this is that when all of these are operating in harmony, you essentially have a state beyond that which man is typically naturally geared to, which is a state of materialism, because we are living in the material world, which we tend to get sucked into. When these are operating in harmony and they're playing like a good orchestra or a good band that is playing, good music, or, they're doing whatever to sound good, you have a state that is akin to a higher spiritual being, because you're able to sense the flow of energy in all these states. You're able to sense when something is in stability, when it's in just 0 point energy of movement. You're able to sense when something goes into movement. You're able to sense when something is ascending beyond that state of movement into a higher energetic form, because we know that when you have almost something like a charge, which on its own is not emitting any energy just by itself, but when that is in movement, it then creates a field around that, and that then produces energy. And when that ascends to a higher state still, then it dissipates into the field. And we're essentially talking about the movement from earth to water to fire to wind there. So that is almost a whole concept in itself. And I'm gonna say this here, that in the future, I don't think I'm going to be going as deep on teaching, or I wouldn't say teaching because it's not really what I intend to do here, but describing the process of going about how to achieve this, because one, I want you guys to find your own path and incorporate these philosophies in the way that you see fit and feel that is useful to you. And that doesn't always mean for everybody ascending to a higher state of spirituality or spiritual divinity where you can move with the agility of one who is fluid or aligned with the cosmos. To some of you, maybe this video is finding you right at the right time you need it, and sometimes that's how the cosmos works. But in other times, it's me talking about something that, maybe I should just be talking about the philosophy behind it. So I think moving forward, we're going to focus more on the philosophy, where I'm talking about what the essence behind these things are rather than how to implement them yourself. And I hope that's actually what this channel becomes more about, because I don't want to take also the journey of experiencing that through your own modalities away from you, in the sense where, almost like you're following an instruction manual because you think you're going to get from point A to point B. Not saying that would even work, but even if it did work, that's not what I aim to really do here, because I feel that when you figure out what you want to do for yourself and you figure out how to implement that, your body will naturally figure out how that thing is supposed to work into the system. And, the overarching way that all of those things can be implemented is philosophy. So you can apply that in whichever way you want, and if you feel that you want those modalities, that information from that philosophy will be derived and it will be applied to you just by nature of what it is. So going into the elements now, from that kind of philosophy of divine essence and divine ki, if you want to say, ki is in ki, meaning also chi. We're talking about a divine state of energy in which one can move beyond the normal limitations of just physicality. We're talking about moving through and beyond energy. And then that becomes moving through and beyond time. And beyond that, I think I'll just leave that at ... So going into the elements here, as we see, a bit different from some of the ones we talked about last week, in the sense where, a couple here are replaced with, instead of, earth, water, fire, wind, or air, you have essentially wood and metal, or, sometimes it's depicted as 4, sometimes it's depicted as 5, but essentially instead of earth, water, fire, wind, and possibly space, if you are adding them up to 5, sometimes people only count 4, but if we're counting these, we have a couple replaced here. We have wind replaced with wood and metal, and we also have space replaced with wood and metal. So what does that mean in the sense of how does that impact the body? This is also from TCM, if you just would like to know the reference point, which stands for Traditional Chinese Medicine. And we'll just cover the philosophy about maybe why or how these work in their system, and that might help explain kind of the differences and similarities between the philosophies. So earth connects with stomach and the spleen here. In some of the other philosophies, this might be more associated with fire, in the sense of stomach is sometimes associated with fire, sometimes is water. But here it is essentially associated with the stomach and spleen. And spleen, I would say, this is actually fundamental, and it was new information to me that actually in this philosophy it was connected with the element of earth. And I believe the reason why is because the root center, or the center of earth, is typically tied to the concept of fear. Because if you think about the lowest instinctual emotion that a human being can feel since the beginning of time, it's fear. If you think about somebody trying to run and catch their prey, or catch the whatever they were hunting out in the wilderness, the caveman times with the spear, or be on the guard for some kind of predator like a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. Seems like that analogy has come up a couple times in the show. you have that fear instinctual reaction that makes you aware of what's in the environment. It's almost like a anchoring mechanism, or a safeguard to be like, hey, you need to pay attention to what's going on in the environment because we're sensing something here. The spleen is essentially what governs that aspect of managing stress, managing these type of emotions. And when you're overcome by these emotions, that's when these organs start to act up. So, and you don't want them to act up. You want them to be in harmony. You want the orchestra to play good. So that's essentially the earth element there. And stomach is also related to that, because you can think of almost that, well, when I feel that emotion, what do I feel next? Sometimes when people feel uneasy, it feels like, you get tension in your stomach, or you get almost like a knot in your stomach, or you get some kind of uneasy energy forming there, which gets tangled up. And you don't want that, because that's essentially letting you know that something in this environment is making me feel not the way I'm supposed to be feeling. And you don't really want to be subjected to that, or if that is a factor in the environment, you want to be aware of it so you can navigate through that. So implementing those, essentially those are tied to the earth element, which is meant to, when it's in harmony, it's meant to prevent things like stress or mitigate things like stress. That's why this is also associated with grounding, which is essentially even an energetic mechanism which tethers you to the earth, so you can disperse the energy that you don't need and feel tethered. If you think even in the gym, when you go to the gym and you want to pick up a heavy weight or whatever, what always helps when you're, say, on bench? If you have a good grip on the bar, if you have a good alignment, if both of the sides are in balance with each other, if you pick up, I'm sure if you go to the gym, you've had this experience numerous times being there on the bench. You pick up the bar and you feel like, oh, my grip is like off, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not doing as many reps as I thought I could have here. Why is that? The reason why that is because your alignment is off. It's no mystery, right? But you feel it on the next set. You put the bar down, whatever, and then you pick it up again on the next set, and you're like, oh yeah, that set went a lot more smoothly than the last one. And it's because the alignment was in the proper place, right? So that's just, regarding alignment and anchoring, because, when you stomp your feet on the ground or try to connect with the energy of the earth, it's essentially the same thing as when you place your hands in the bar. You're anchoring yourself to a physical mechanism or a physical object in which you are then providing force into, right? Whether that's the ground because you're picking up something heavy, whether that's the bar because you're going to do bench press and want your body to be in alignment or whatever. And I was saying this on something I was recording just at I was doing some exercise in the gym at home, and I was recording this, and I was saying, if you're not in alignment with the bar, just put it down, pick it up again. It takes like 2 seconds, right? Like, a lot of people will be like, okay, well, let me just bang out the set, whatever. But there's more chance you're going to hurt yourself or do something that is going to be a detriment, rather than you actually getting some substantial benefit from that thing, right? So instead of deriving the benefit that you would get from having done the set the way it's supposed to be done, you possibly subject yourself to injury instead, right? So you don't want to do that by any means, because it's not really beneficial to you or to anyone around you. So again, this is essentially what we're talking about here, right? And, again, this is the element of earth. We're talking about grounding here. Moving on, we'll go to water and the kidneys. Kidneys also reactive to stress, but in a different way. The water element operates, and again, you could tie this with divine feminine energy. I would say that, well, in the essence and the way they go, typically, you have the root center, earth, which is a masculine force, water, which is a feminine force, fire, which is a masculine force, wind, which is a feminine force, and then you have space, which is again in relation to sound, which is a masculine force. Then you have light, which is a feminine force, and then you have cosmic energy, which is the highest point, which is again a masculine force. So it's really just a repeating cycle, but it describes the flow of the energy, in which one is more about internal motion and one is about external motion, or up and down, or dark and light, or whatever, yin and yang you want to say, right? But the essence is that these two colliding energies, or these two opposing energies, create a harmonic balance in which something can be achieved. So going back to water and the kidneys, and it also says the bladder there, the reason why this is crucial is because when we think about water, we're talking about emotionality, you know? If we're thinking about feminine essence, we're thinking about understanding things from an emotional perspective, right? We're thinking about understanding things from the way things feel, not in just a sense of, oh, my feelings are hurt, but in a sense of, what do I sense on an instinctual level within me or within this environment? What emotion am I sensing? What am I feeling right now? You know, am I feeling relaxed? Am I feeling ease? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to take a breath? Do I need to take a sip of tea? That is also a feeling, right? So we're talking about very interesting concepts and two forces here, really. So again, kidneys and the bladder operate a lot off emotions, and what happens when emotions get trapped? They go to the earth because they become solidified. You know, it's almost like you're turning water into ice, right? It becomes frozen and becomes stuck. So that's where energy gets trapped in the stomach and the spleen and whatnot. So, and when you're releasing that, or when that energy is able to be transmuted out, it goes to the kidneys and the bladder, meaning that that energy can be filtered through the system. You know, if you think about it, if you have something like a bad meal, in the sense of, you know, what you're eating is not necessarily the best quality of food, right? And, you know, I don't want to go too much into the, you know, imagery of this, but you go to the bathroom and you notice that, you know, the color might not be as clear as it could be, or closer to green as it could be, is because your system is filtering out toxins. It's filtering out the unwanted energy that is stored there, right? So when you're drinking water, when everything's functioning properly, you get clear relief, essentially, and the bladder and kidneys function properly because the energy of what is supposed to be in harmony is in harmony, right? So there's no tension, there's no stress, because, you know, maybe you're eating blueberries or bananas or whatever, and you got the antioxidants pumping through your system, and then, you know, basically the system likes that and everything's hunky-dory, and it actually not just only keeps the system properly filtrated, but it actually rejuvenates and replenishes the system and reverses any damage that has been inflicted. So any energy or any thing that has afflicted you within that time period has now been relieved because you have these antioxidants or whatever from consuming the things that you're originally supposed to consume. So Mother Earth is a great caretaker of you. So I'll just say that again because I might have butchered it. Mother Earth is a great caretaker of you. So just remember that, because, you know, if you're always looking for something to support you, just realize that it's right under your feet. You don't need to go too far to get it. And, you know, to all the Gen Zs or whatever out there, especially the guys, you know, the best source of feminine energy you could ever need around you is right beneath your feet. So just remember they're always constantly supported. And it's interesting how that is also a masculine force as well. We talk about earth here, which is a masculine force, but the earth beneath that, in the truest sense of yin, is actually a feminine force. So again, the cycle repeats itself, but it can be depicted in either way, really. But fact is, all that support is really at your disposal here, and it's available to you anytime you want it. So all you have to do is really open yourself up to it and realize that it's not going anywhere. It never has gone anywhere. It's always been there, but it's up to you to realize it. Wise man once said that the truth cannot be taught, must be realized. So understanding that, important. Also, you want another, masculine source in the solar system. You got the sun. It's a masculine force that, we always have access to. And if you want another feminine source, you have the moon, which is pretty much always commonly associated with feminine energy. So all the masculine and feminine harmony you can ever need is always around you if you are open to receiving it. So I think as human beings, we become really dependent on one another and, want, emotional connection with each other, which isn't normal, natural. But I think being dependent on that and relying on it can become a detriment, and you have to have the humility to admit that it can become one. So moving on from the kidneys and bladder, but essentially when you release that energy by realizing that emotionally you are supported on a level where you can rejuvenate and you can regenerate, and you are supported, and the toxins that you absorb through this water, because the kidneys and bladder deal with water, which is set up there. Again, if you're watching live, this is not like edited and gone back and recorded like 100 times to get this perfect. This is live, authentic, like me talking about spirituality right here in the studio. So again, this is water being cleared out of the system, meant to release energy from the system or absorb energy into the system. Just like, things that make you feel uneasy can be absorbed, things that make you feel comfortable and relaxed and what's the word I'm looking for here? Stable or in alignment or balanced is the word I'm looking for, can also be absorbed. So understanding that is also an aspect. Or nurtured is a good word. Nurtured, especially relating back to earth. These two concepts are very linked, water and earth, because water is the thing that makes the soil grow, right? So, it could... Oh, I'm getting flashes here. Yeah. They're going like this behind the scenes. But yeah, essentially that's the thing that makes the earth grow, right? Or the plants grow, water, right? So that's water. It absorbs vibration, absorbs energy. When you release and clear that, you get a release of energy. Going into fire now, this is the triple heater that it's described in TCM, or again, that's traditional Chinese medicine. And essentially what the triple burner is, you can almost think of it like the root of a plant, and it stems from the earth all the way up to, it's almost like a tree branch that comes up and it goes through all the meridians, essentially. And or nadis, if you want to say as well. That's how it's referred to in more Indian philosophy. So that's essentially the translation. You got the nadis and you have the chi meridians, which is described in this philosophy. And essentially what it's depicting here is that energy coming up and branching out through all these different pathways and traveling to everything, because it stems from the base, but it transforms or transcends into something higher where it branches out, just like a tree branches out, and it goes out and touches all the other aspects of the body. So, and it's also sometimes called the triple warmer, but essentially the concept is that it's related to both the root center and the fire center, or aspect of fire, because it's the ability to rejuvenate and give rebirth. So it's almost like you can think of trees going from winter or fall to winter to spring, in which they are reborn in a sense, because they don't bloom in the winter and then they bloom again in the spring and summer, right? They are brought back almost, right? So this is essentially the concept we're talking about here when we're talking about fire, and it's related to the pericardium, just ASMRing it out actually, because maybe I should start doing that, start whispering my shows like this, or talking so quietly that almost no one can hear. But I'm thinking about doing that with another channel actually. But essentially, going back to the pericardium here, it's the heart protector, which is essentially it's the mechanism that protects the heart, or protects it or keeps it from damage, right? And when this is functioning properly, you have a heart that is supported by a foundation or type of energy in which it remains unhurt, and it doesn't become afflicted by things like stress. It doesn't become afflicted by things like environmental damage or emotional damage, or specifically deep emotional soul type damage. It doesn't become afflicted by those things, because the pericardium is the heart protector. And this actually, we'll go to the metal element after here. Well, actually, maybe I should have done wood and then fire. Yeah. Well, you know what? I should have gone over wood first, but here, we'll change gears a little. The wood element, you can think of as it really is the fuel that is tossed onto the fire, in which that is heated up and transformed into fire, and that's related to gallbladder and liver. And interesting to note that the liver in the more other Eastern philosophies is related to fire. So these two are kind of interchangeable in some senses, where they cross over, but essentially you have the concept here, because they don't have wood in the other philosophy. This is where you can see the similarities and differences. In the other philosophy, they don't have wood, which is the fuel of fire, but here they have wood. And here wood is depicted as the liver and gallbladder, and it acts as the insulator for the body, as opposed to water, which is the conductor. And the way I should have described these things in order is earth, water, wood, then fire, because that would be a more descriptor of how this process actually transforms from one another. So going back to this, we'll just talk about this because fire and wood are closely related. So we covered fire, which essentially is a heart protector and the thing that rejuvenates the body in the essence of rebirth. Wood is the fuel that gets burned to generate that fire. You know, the liver is forever regenerating. We hear about the tale of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, essentially, and one of the gods, I believe it was Zeus, essentially cursed him to have a crow peck out his liver till I don't know when, but essentially that was the tale, that because his liver would just regenerate or rejuvenate, and he would, the process would just continue, right? But the point was that it impacted his liver, because that is tied to the concept of fire. So just summing up here, we'll go to metal, which is related to the lungs, which is, you see some people do this on the internet, and I'm not going to go into who those people are, but, one guy is, running amok in, the neighboring country right now. King of the electric cars, and the other guy, bald head bro in the Bugatti. So, but both of those guys use that hand symbol, but it's not a symbol really. It's called a mudra. And what a mudra is it's a hand position, a yogic hand position that channels energy in a specific way, and it connects to this element of metal, which is tied to the lungs and which recirculates energy through the body, because metal is a conductor of energy. It conducts things like lightning. So when energy from the crown comes, it recirculates it through the system, through the pranic breathing, and thus this recirculation or respiratory process takes place. So summing up here, we covered the elements today. We covered divine key and divine essence. We covered the harmony of all the elements connected with each other, creating this harmonic symphony in which everything is playing like something like Beethoven, or akin to Beethoven, or some divine orchestra or band. And essentially, yeah, that's it. So again, I encourage you to help support the channel, like, subscribe, and follow us in DC Media Hub. This is Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio, and I'm Ryan, your host. Follow me on Instagram at top_sorcerer. And again, help support the channel, because it helps me provide more content like this, so I can not just assist you guys but assist myself as well in our journey together. And I'll see you next time.